The scream echoed through the marble halls long before Kennedy saw who it came from. She froze by the grand staircase, one hand clutching a tray of silver cutlery. The sound wasn't loud, but it carried through the air like glass shattering underwater. It came from upstairs, from the little girl's room. Emma again. It was her first week working for the Harrisons, and already, the house felt alive in all the wrong ways. The floors gleamed so perfectly they reflected her blue maid uniform like a mirror, but the air carried the weight of things unsaid, of silence that didn't feel peaceful, only suffocating. Kennedy hadn't asked many questions during the interview. The agency call had come out of nowhere. A domestic staffing firm she'd registered with months earlier called her late one night while she was folding laundry in her tiny Atlanta apartment. Private family in Manhattan, the woman said cheerfully. Background checked, verified, very generous offer. They need discretion above all else. You'd be live-in staff, responsible for the daughter, 8 years old, special needs, nonverbal, $5,000 a month, plus housing. $5,000. More money than Kennedy had ever seen in one place, certainly more than she'd earned scrubbing dental offices and hotel rooms. The next morning, she packed a single suitcase, kissed her neighbor goodbye, and boarded the first train north. By noon, she was staring up at the 30-story glass tower that pierced the Manhattan skyline. The Harrison penthouse took her breath away, not because it was beautiful, but because it felt cold. Too cold. Before we go further, subscribe and comment where you're watching from. This story is about to break your heart. Kennedy met the head housekeeper, Patricia West, a tall silver-haired woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. "You're filling the 6th position this year," Patricia said without so much as a smile. "I hope you last longer than the others." 6th. Kennedy knew better than to ask. Patricia's list of house rules had been printed on gold-trimmed paper. Rule number 1, do not engage Miss Emma unless spoken to. Rule number 2, dinner preparation is at 6 o'clock. Silence is expected during Mr. Harrison's meals. Rule number 3, no personal calls, no visitors, no exceptions. That should have been enough to scare her. But she needed this job. And when she met Emma for the first time, every reason to leave disappeared. Emma Harrison was the most heartbreaking little girl Kennedy had ever seen. Sitting on her soft pink rug in silence, her bright red blouse clashing against the pale room, the 8-year-old stared out of the window as if she could see something beyond the city skyline that no one else could. Blue eyes like crystal. Blonde curls, small hands gripping a plush rabbit missing its ear. Kennedy had expected tantrums, maybe confusion, but not emptiness. The child hardly noticed as Kennedy introduced herself. She blinked, tilted her head slightly, then went back to tracing invisible shapes on the glass. It was only when Kennedy knelt to her level and said softly, "You don't have to talk, baby. I talk too much for the both of us," that Emma turned. Just once. Long enough to lock eyes. Long enough for something unspoken to pass between them. That single glance changed everything. The first days passed uneventfully, at least, on the surface. Kennedy cleaned, cooked, and hovered quietly in the background while Richard Harrison, one of New York's most powerful real estate moguls, stalked through the penthouse with the detached arrogance of a man who thought compassion was weakness. He was handsome in a severe way, early 40s, silver streak in his dark hair, always in crisp suits even at home. His tone was never raised, but every word came down like judgment. Kennedy soon learned that Emma's silence wasn't because she couldn't speak. It was because her father didn't want her to. The child flinched whenever Richard entered the room. And every time Kennedy tried to comfort her, Patricia would pull her aside, "Don't overstep." The last maid tried to be kind. She was dismissed by the end of the week. So Kennedy adjusted. She spoke softly around Emma, never forced eye contact, never touched her without permission. Instead, she found small ways to show care, a teddy bear mended in secret, a hand-painted mug for breakfast, stories told softly at night, even when Emma couldn't respond. It worked. Slowly, Emma started to trust her. She would sit beside Kennedy while she folded laundry or stand at the kitchen doorway to listen to her hum. Every so often, she'd smile, a fleeting, fragile thing that disappeared the moment heavy footsteps echoed in the hall. When Richard was home, every room fell silent. One evening, after cleaning the dining area, Kennedy was heading back to the staff quarters when she heard muffled voices from Mr. Harrison's study. The door was nearly closed, but not enough to block the sound of his anger. "I told you to delete everything," Richard hissed. "If the ledger leaks, it's prison. Do you hear me, Johnson? Prison. That maid's been snooping. She asked questions about the accounts again. Handle it." Kennedy froze mid-step, throat dry. The word ledger repeated in her mind like an alarm. She took a step backward, but the floorboard creaked beneath her heel. Richard's voice cut off like a snapped wire. The door opened. They locked eyes, the billionaire and the maid. For a second, neither spoke. Then Richard's lips curled into a slow, chilling smile. "You should learn to be careful where you wander, Miss Mitchell," he said softly. "Curiosity doesn't suit you." I was just passing through, sir," Kennedy stammered. "Didn't mean to interrupt." "It's fine," he interrupted, still smiling. But his tone sounded final, like the slam of a closing door. "But let's be clear, there are rooms in this home you don't enter. Ever. I trust that's understood." "Yes, sir." He held her gaze for a beat too long before turning back inside. Kennedy exhaled once the door shut. That night, she wrote in her hidden notebook for the first time. "Mr. Harrison is hiding something. Emma's silence isn't illness, it's fear. And if he finds out I might end up like the others." Days blurred into each other. Kennedy tried to stay invisible. But Emma's quiet would not let her. One afternoon, Kennedy found her coloring a crude drawing on the living room floor. The paper showed a tall man in a suit beside a car, and a smaller figure beneath, lying motionless. The red crayon streaks were everywhere. Kennedy knelt beside her. "Baby, who's this?" Emma pointed at the tall man, then scribbled a tear next to the boyish figure on the ground. Kennedy's throat went dry. "That's your daddy." Emma's tiny hand wavered, then traced a heart above Kennedy's uniform pocket. She looked up at her with those same blue eyes, eyes that didn't need to speak to say, "Be careful." That night, Kennedy couldn't sleep. She remembered the car accident rumor that had killed Mrs. Harrison years ago, how police said the brakes failed. A whisper rose in her mind she couldn't silence. What if it wasn't an accident? Don't forget to subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Something dark is about to unfold. The collision came 3 days later, only not in traffic. It started with Patricia rushing into the kitchen during breakfast, clutching her tablet. "Kennedy, where did you put the Harrison necklace?" Kennedy frowned. "What necklace?" "The diamond collection from Mrs. Harrison's estate." Patricia was panting now, panic in her wrinkled face. "Mr. Harrison's looking for it. The case is empty." Kennedy wiped her hands on her apron. "I don't touch personal belongings. You know that." But then Richard appeared in the doorway, cool and composed. "The footage says otherwise," he said. "What footage?" Kennedy blinked. He handed her a tablet. On it played a video. Grainy security camera footage of Kennedy entering his bedroom late at night, rifling through the drawer where the jewelry used to be. "That's not me," she said immediately. "That's faked." Richard folded his arms. "Police are on their way. Your things will be checked." Kennedy's voice broke. "Sir, please, why are you doing this?" He smiled faintly. "You should have stayed out of my study." Patricia turned away, pretending not to see the tears building in Kennedy's eyes. Emma stood in the corner, clutching her doll, frozen in place. When sirens echoed outside, the child ran forward suddenly, gripping Kennedy's skirt, shaking her head desperately, almost as if begging her father to stop. "Emma," Richard said sharply, "go to your room." But she didn't move. Her wide blue eyes were shining with something new, defiance. As police cuffed Kennedy and led her toward the elevator, Emma burst into silent tears. Her small hands beat against the air, her lips parted as if words were finally trying to escape. She reached for Kennedy, but Richard pulled her back. And just before the elevator doors closed, Kennedy saw it, Emma's trembling lips forming shapes no one else noticed. For silent words mouthed through glass. "Daddy is lying." The first cracks in the Harrison empire had just begun to show. And for the first time in 8 years, Emma wasn't silent anymore, just no one had heard her yet. Kennedy sat in the back of the police car, hands cuffed, her wrists burning against the metal. The swirling blue lights painted the city in flashes of shame and disbelief. Through the tinted window, she could still see the penthouse balcony high above, a tower of glass and lies where her nightmare had started. She couldn't understand it. She'd only been in New York 3 weeks. How could she already be wearing handcuffs? When the hiring agency called, they promised her safety, stability, and a chance at redemption after losing everything. But now, her name was plastered across police radios, and her life, what little of it she had rebuilt, was being crushed under a billionaire's thumb. Inside, her mind replayed the moment the officers found the velvet jewelry box hidden in her dresser drawer. She hadn't even gone near it, yet there it was, the missing diamond necklace worth more than her dreams could buy. Her voice shook when she tried to explain, but her words were no match for Mr. Harrison's wealth or his influence. Before things spiral further, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because truth is about to fight back. At the precinct, Kennedy sat in a cold metal chair while 2 detectives questioned her. The older one, Detective Burns, leaned across the table. "You were seen entering Mr. Harrison's bedroom at approximately 11:32 p.m. last Thursday, do you deny it?" Kennedy's breath caught. "I never went in there. The video's fake. Someone must have edited it." Burns raised an eyebrow. "You saying a billionaire doctored evidence just to frame a housemaid?" "Yes," she said simply, voice trembling but steady. The woman detective at the corner scribbled notes, frowning slightly, her tone softer. "Look, you're new in the city, right? Maybe someone offered you a deal. Maybe it got out of hand. You can help yourself if you tell us where the necklace really is." Kennedy shook her head hard. "I didn't steal anything. That little girl, Emma, she knows the truth." Burns sighed. "The mute kid? She can't even testify." Kennedy's heart cracked a little more. "She's not mute," she whispered. "She's scared." Across town, in the serene courtroom of the New York County Supreme Court, marble floors gleamed under golden chandeliers. Wealth whispered in every corner. Reporters gathered outside the glass doors, murmuring about the dramatic twist, a maid accused of robbing one of the city's most powerful real estate tycoons. Kennedy waited at the defense table, wrists free now but heart chained with dread. The public defender beside her, a young man named Aaron Pike, looked like he hadn't slept in days. He adjusted his glasses, voice low. "They control the narrative, Miss Mitchell." Harrison's lawyer, Dwayne Petrov, built his reputation burying cases like this. "I don't want money or mercy," Kennedy said. "I just want the truth." Aaron sighed. "Then pray someone in this courtroom wants it too." In the front row, Richard Harrison sat perfectly still, dressed in his usual light gray suit, expression unreadable. To his right, Patricia, the head housekeeper, sat with folded arms, eyes lowered. And beside them, in a small custom-made dress, was Emma. Motionless, clutching her worn-out rabbit doll. She looked so small in that vast, echoing space. Her father's hand rested on her shoulder, but she kept her distance, her body stiff, fingers twitching against her skirt. Kennedy caught her gaze once, just once, and mouthed silently, "It's okay." Then the bailiff's voice cut through. All rise. The trial began with cruelty disguised as professionalism. Dwayne Petrov, Harrison's shark of a lawyer, paced slowly before the jury. This case, he began smoothly, is about betrayal, about trust violently broken. My client, a respected businessman and widowed father, extended an opportunity to a woman in need. And how did she repay him? By stealing a priceless family heirloom. He paused dramatically, sliding a document onto the projector screen, a still image from the doctored footage showing Kennedy entering Harrison's bedroom. This is proof, he declared gravely. The jury gasped in collective disapproval. Kennedy clenched her fists under the table. It was surreal, watching herself move through a digital lie. Her lawyer rose. The footage is heavily compressed and lacks metadata verification, he said, trying to sound confident. We request a technical audit. Dwayne smirked. A convenient excuse for guilty hands. Aaron fell silent. He didn't have the weight Richard's money could buy. Neither did Kennedy. All she had left was faith, the fragile kind that came from knowing the truth but not knowing how to prove it. When it was her turn to testify, Kennedy took the stand. Her palms were slick with nervous sweat. She looked toward Emma again, the only bright thing in a sea of hostility. Miss Mitchell, Dwayne said with feigned politeness, how long were you employed by Mr. Harrison before you decided his family's wealth was your opportunity? I never stole from him, Kennedy answered quietly. Dwayne smiled coldly. So you're saying my client, a billionaire who could buy anything in the world, planted evidence in your apartment just to ruin you? Kennedy met his gaze. Exactly. The courtroom murmured. Richard crossed one leg over the other, unbothered. Dwayne leaned closer. Why would he do that, Miss Mitchell? What possible reason could Mr. Harrison have to frame his own maid? Kennedy hesitated. Should she tell them about the phone call? The files labeled confidential, Harrison Investments. If she did, she might sign her own death sentence. But silence would make her complicit. She exhaled shakily. Because I found something in his office, something that connects him to money laundering through government contracts. I didn't mean to see it. But he caught me. And the next day, I was fired and arrested. Gasps filled the courtroom. Dwayne's fake empathy melted into fury. Objection. Conjecture and slander. The judge raised a hand. Overruled, for now. Dwayne turned toward Richard. The billionaire's jaw had tightened. Just a little. As Kennedy stepped down from the witness box, she noticed Emma watching her again. Something flickered behind the child's eyes, a storm waiting to break. The judge called for recess. During the break, Kennedy sat near a window while Aaron flipped through papers nervously. If we had proof of those files, we could win this thing, he murmured. Without it, her word against his won't stand. Kennedy nodded, lost in thought. He keeps a safe behind his office painting. Maybe. She stopped as their conversation was interrupted by a low voice. Patricia stood behind them, clutching her purse. He's dangerous, she said softly. You have no idea what you're caught in. Walk away while you can. Kennedy frowned. Why are you telling me this now? Because you remind me of someone, Patricia whispered. His wife. She thought she could save the girl too. Before Kennedy could respond, Patricia turned and walked away. That single sentence set Kennedy's mind racing. What did she mean, save the girl? Back in session, Dwayne presented the necklace to the court. Under courtroom light, the diamonds glittered like 1,000 accusing eyes. Recovered from the defendant's apartment by NYPD, he said smoothly. Your Honor, Aaron objected, chain of custody review shows the evidence was. Sit down, counselor, the judge ordered. Richard folded his hands on the table. You took advantage of my kindness, he said, addressing Kennedy directly, pretending to sound wounded. I hired you to help my daughter. You betrayed my trust. Kennedy stared at him in disbelief. The man could lie as easily as breathing. The judge turned to deliver closing remarks, his gavel ready. This court finds sufficient evidence to proceed toward sentencing. A faint sound interrupted him. Everyone turned. From the front row, a small voice whispered, trembling but clear, "No." The courtroom froze. Emma stood up. For 8 years, she hadn't spoken a word. But now, her tiny voice filled the air, fragile but defiant. "My daddy's lying," she said, tears rolling down her cheeks. Miss Kennedy didn't steal anything. Gasps rippled like electricity. Dwayne's face went pale. Richard's control shattered for a fraction of a second, jaw tightening, eyes flashing cold rage. He reached for Emma instinctively, but she stepped back, trembling. Her words hung in stunned silence. Reporters outside could be heard shouting as they stormed in. Cameras clicked like gunfire. "Subscribe now and tell me where you're watching from," because her voice just changed everything. The judge pounded his gavel, calling for order. "The child will be escorted out immediately." But history had already been rewritten. Emma clutched her doll, staring straight at her father. Across the courtroom, Kennedy's heart swelled with both pride and dread. The truth was bursting open, but the cost had just doubled. As Emma was led away by child services, Richard leaned close to his lawyer, voice low but full of venom. "Make this disappear," he hissed. "And make her disappear too." Kennedy saw the exchange, her blood running cold. For the first time since this started, she realized the diamond necklace wasn't the only piece of evidence at stake. It was her life. And now that Emma had spoken, they were both in danger. Richard Harrison wasn't done. He was just getting started. The world seemed to stop after those 3 words left Emma's mouth. "My daddy's lying." The entire courtroom froze. Reporters gasped. The judge's gavel slammed, demanding silence, but no one heard him. Cameras flashed wildly. And in the center of it all stood an 8-year-old girl who had not spoken a sound since the day her mother died. Emma trembled, clutching her stuffed rabbit as her father's piercing stare burned into her. Her small chest rose and fell with each frightened breath, but her voice, though shaky, was unmistakably clear. Kennedy's own breath caught. Tears welled up. After all this time, the child she had promised to protect had found her voice. But the moment glowed only for a second before chaos consumed the room. Before we continue, subscribe now, because what happens next will shake you. "Your Honor," Richard Harrison roared, rising to his feet. "My daughter has a medical condition. She doesn't understand what she's saying." The judge slammed his gavel again. "Order. Mr. Harrison, sit down or I'll hold you in contempt." Kennedy reached out instinctively as officers surrounded Emma. The little girl, her voice cracking, cried out, "He made it up. He made her take the blame." The courtroom dissolved into noise. Kennedy tried to stand, but the bailiff held her back. "Stay seated, Miss Mitchell." Emma's eyes darted around the crowd before finding Kennedy's. She pointed toward her father's briefcase and whispered something no one else could hear, "The papers." Kennedy's heart pounded. The papers? What papers? The judge ordered a recess as law enforcement escorted Emma out of the room for her safety. Kennedy's knees trembled under her as officers led her back to her seat. Richard glared at her across the room. His face was calm, but his eyes, those sharp gray eyes, were seething. He leaned toward his lawyer, Dwayne Petrov. "Fix it, or we all go down," he hissed. The recess dragged on for hours. Kennedy sat alone in a small holding room outside the courtroom, shaking. Emma's sudden voice had changed everything, but also nothing. Richard still held all the power. He controlled narratives, money, and fear. Finally, Aaron Pike, her attorney, entered, clutching a disorganized pile of documents. "You're not going to like this," he said grimly. They're accusing you of coaching the child to lie. Kennedy's eyes widened. What? She hasn't said a single word to anyone in 8 years. How could I? Money makes stories believable, Aaron murmured, sinking into a chair. They're saying your presence encouraged false memories. That you manipulated her. Kennedy shook her head violently. I love that little girl, Aaron. She saved me, I didn't save her. Aaron sighed. I believe you. But juries believe what they're shown, not what's true. He opened a thin file. I submitted a motion to subpoena Harrison's financial records. If we can prove his offshore accounts exist, it'll change everything. But if he destroys those files before we get them, we're sunk. Kennedy leaned back, her mind spiraling. Emma said something about papers, in his briefcase. Maybe that's it. Aaron rubbed his temples. If you're right, he'll guard them with his life. Meanwhile, in the judge's chambers, Agent Daniel Ruiz of the FBI was waiting. The veteran agent had been circling Richard Harrison for 2 years, trying to expose the laundering operation connected to several illegal real estate developments in Dubai. We've suspected Harrison's using shell companies to hide government kickbacks, Ruiz told the judge. If that girl's testimony holds up, we can finally tie him to the Panama accounts. The judge nodded solemnly. Do it quietly. The child's trauma already complicates matters. Back home, Richard slammed the penthouse door hard enough to make the chandelier tremble. He turned to Patricia, who stood frozen by the kitchen island. That little brat just destroyed everything, he spat. And you, did you leak anything? Patricia shook her head. No, sir. Nothing. She opened her mouth, he muttered, pacing. She wasn't supposed to ever speak. His words were chilling, sterile. He ran a hand through his slicked hair and unlocked his office safe, pulling out a thick envelope. Inside were 2 passports, wads of cash, and a USB drive. Patricia's eyes widened. You're leaving. Preparing, he corrected. If the evidence reaches prosecutors, I'll need insurance. What about your daughter? She asked softly. Richard's jaw clenched. Emma will do what she's told. At dusk, Kennedy was released pending appeal. Outside the courthouse, news reporters shouted questions, flashbulbs blinding her. She covered her face and pushed through, ignoring them all. Someone grabbed her arm. It was Patricia. Come with me, the housekeeper whispered urgently. You need to know something before they silence you, too. Kennedy hesitated, fear coiling inside her chest. But something about Patricia's trembling eyes told her this wasn't a trap. They walked down a quiet alley until Patricia stopped and handed Kennedy a folded envelope. Richard's wife didn't die in that car accident, Patricia said quietly. She found out about his shell companies. She threatened to go to the FBI. The brakes were cut. I heard him on the phone that night. Kennedy's knees went weak. Oh my God. Inside, Patricia said, nodding at the envelope. Her death certificate, it's a forgery. I kept copies for years, afraid to show anyone. But after what your trial exposed, it's time. Kennedy tore it open, a copy of the police report marked, closed without findings. Yet someone had blacked out entire pages. In the corner was an unredacted note, witness statement retracted under counsel direction. Kennedy's voice trembled. He bought their silence. Patricia nodded. And he'll buy yours next, if you let him. Kennedy gripped the papers tightly, panic rising in her chest. We need to get these to Agent Ruiz. He can protect Emma. Patricia stepped back. Do it soon. Because tonight, Richard's losing control, and he's dangerous when cornered. Don't forget to subscribe now, things are about to explode. Later that night, Kennedy waited outside Agent Ruiz's office with shaking hands. Inside, he examined the envelope, eyes narrowing. "These are copies of the same records we've been looking for," he said. "Patricia's risking her life with this." He opened a folder, revealing the connection between Harrison Enterprises and an offshore account under the alias L. Monroe. This could convict him of not just fraud, but conspiracy to murder. "But Emma," Kennedy said. "He'll go after her." Ruiz's jaw tightened. "She's already under protective custody with CPS agents tonight." Kennedy exhaled a shaky breath of relief, but it didn't last. A junior agent ran into the room, face pale. "Sir." There was a breach at the CPS facility downtown, armed man posing as security took the girl. Kennedy's heart stopped. "Emma?" Ruiz rose instantly. "Lock down the building. Check all private security footage." Kennedy stepped forward, voice trembling. "He took her, didn't he?" "Richard." Ruiz nodded grimly. "He's desperate." Midnight fell over New York. Rain poured over glinting sidewalks as a black SUV sped across the bridge. Inside, Emma sat silently in the back seat, doll clutched tight. Richard sat beside her, gaze fixed ahead. "You're coming with me, sweetheart," he said, voice low. "We're starting over. You don't need those people. You don't need anyone but me." Emma turned her head, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Her tiny lips parted, but no sound came out. For a brief moment, Richard almost softened. "Say something, honey. Please." But she didn't. Her silence screamed back at him louder than words ever could. Meanwhile, Ruiz's team tracked the SUV through traffic cameras, swapping coordinates over radio static. But every intersection they passed was empty. Kennedy stood by the window of Ruiz's office, shaking. "He'll hurt her if we don't find them." Ruiz looked grim. "We will." He spread a map on the table. Where would he go? Somewhere safe, isolated, private, maybe one of his properties. Kennedy pointed to a spot outside the city. The Hamptons. His wife's summer house. Ruiz called for units immediately. By dawn, the convoy reached Harrison's Hamptons estate. Fog rolled off the ocean, crawling through the surrounding pine trees. Inside, Richard sat on the floor beside Emma, staring at old photographs of his late wife. "They all turned on me, Emma. Everyone. But you'll understand, won't you?" The little girl said nothing. Then, softly, she pushed a photo toward him, the one showing her mother, and whispered the only word that could break him. "Murder." For a moment, Richard didn't react. Then something snapped. His eyes went wild. "You don't know what you're saying." Sirens echoed outside. He grabbed her arm. "Come on. We're leaving." But as he pulled her toward the door, the mansion's glass entryway shattered. Federal agents stormed in, voices shouting commands. Ruiz's voice cut through the smoke. "Drop her, Harrison." Richard froze, fury flashing in his eyes. He shoved Emma behind him, reaching for the gun at his hip. "You'll take everything from me, like she did." Kennedy stepped into view, shaking but steady. "You already took everything, Richard." He turned sharply toward her. Their eyes met, his filled with rage, hers with quiet defiance. And as the standoff began, Emma, trembling behind him, whispered words that turned every head in the room. "Miss Kennedy, run." The shot rang out before anyone could move. The bullet had missed Kennedy by inches. She lay flat on the cold marble floor of the Hamptons estate, ears ringing, heart pounding so hard she thought her ribs might crack. Around her, federal agents shouted commands, boots stomping through broken glass. Emma's small, terrified scream cut through the chaos. Kennedy lifted her head just enough to see Richard Harrison sprawled on the floor 10 feet away, clutching his bleeding shoulder. An FBI agent stood over him, weapon drawn. "Suspect down. Secure the perimeter." But Richard wasn't unconscious, he was laughing. Blood soaked through his expensive gray suit, yet he smiled like a man who'd already won. "You think, this ends, with me?" he rasped between labored breaths. Agent Ruiz stormed forward, grabbing Richard by the collar. "Where's the girl?" Richard's eyes gleamed with malice. "Ask her mother." Kennedy's blood ran cold. Emma's mother had been dead for 4 years. Ruiz released him roughly as paramedics rushed in. Kennedy scrambled to her feet, scanning the wreckage. "Emma! Where are you, baby?" A tiny voice came from behind the overturned sofa. "Miss Kennedy." Kennedy ran, dropping to her knees beside the 8-year-old. Emma was curled into a ball, trembling, her red blouse torn at the sleeve. Kennedy pulled her into her arms. "I've got you. You're safe now." But even as she said it, Richard's laughter echoed in her mind. Ask her mother. Subscribe now, because nothing about Emma's mother is what you think. By midday, Kennedy and Emma were moved to a federal safe house in Brooklyn, a cramped apartment above a laundromat, far from the glass towers and marble floors of the Harrison world. 2 agents stood guard outside while Ruiz debriefed Kennedy in the tiny kitchen. "Harrison's in surgery," Ruiz said, pouring himself black coffee. "Once he's stable, we'll transfer him to federal custody. But he's already lawyered up, top-tier defense team out of D.C. Kennedy sat across from him, exhausted. He said something before they took him. About Emma's mother. What did he mean? Ruiz hesitated, then pulled out a worn manila folder from his briefcase. "We've been investigating Richard Harrison for 2 years. His wife, Claire Harrison, died in a car accident 4 years ago, at least, that's the official story." He slid a photograph across the table. It showed a beautiful woman with blonde hair and blue eyes, Emma's eyes, standing beside Richard at some charity gala. She looked radiant, but something in her smile seemed forced. "Claire was a biomedical researcher," Ruiz continued. "Specialized in genetic therapies. She was about to publish findings that would have exposed illegal human trials funded by offshore investors, trials Richard helped finance through his real estate shell companies." Kennedy's stomach twisted. "You're saying he killed her?" "The brake line in her car was severed," Ruiz said quietly. "Police ruled it mechanical failure, but the lead investigator at the time received a $200,000 deposit in his offshore account 2 weeks later. We flagged it last year." Kennedy felt sick. "And Emma?" "Emma was in the car," Ruiz said. "She survived the crash, but she hasn't spoken since. Until yesterday." Kennedy looked toward the bedroom where Emma was sleeping, curled up with her stuffed rabbit. "She saw her mother die," Kennedy whispered. "And her father made sure she could never tell anyone." Ruiz nodded grimly. "That's why she stopped talking. It wasn't medical, it was trauma." Kennedy stood abruptly, anger surging through her. "He's a monster. And you're telling me he might walk free?" "Not if we build an airtight case," Ruiz said. "But we need Emma's testimony. And we need to find Claire's research files, wherever Richard hid them." That night, Kennedy sat beside Emma's bed, watching the little girl sleep. Moonlight filtered through the thin curtains, casting shadows across her pale face. She looked so small, so fragile, yet she'd survived more than most adults ever would. "Miss Kennedy." Emma's eyes fluttered open. "I'm here, baby. Go back to sleep." But Emma sat up, clutching her rabbit. "I want to tell you something. About Mommy." Kennedy's heart ached. "You don't have to." "I remember," Emma whispered. "The car. The noise. Mommy was crying. She said Daddy was going to hurt us." Kennedy's breath caught. "What else do you remember?" "She gave me something. Before the crash. She said to keep it safe. That one day, someone brave would help me." Emma reached into her pillowcase and pulled out a small USB drive, hidden in the stuffing of her rabbit all these years. Kennedy stared at it, hands trembling. "Emma, this might be what everyone's been looking for." "Mommy said it was important," Emma said. "She said it would stop the bad people." Kennedy called Ruiz immediately. Within the hour, Ruiz's tech team was working on the USB drive. What they found made everyone in the room go silent. The drive contained Claire Harrison's entire research database, patient files, financial transactions, and video recordings of illegal medical experiments conducted on unknowing participants. The experiments were funded by a network called ArcLight Holdings, with Richard Harrison listed as primary financial liaison. But the most damning evidence was a video dated 3 days before Claire's death. Ruiz played it on his laptop. Claire appeared on screen, sitting in her car, tears streaming down her face. "My name is Dr. Claire Harrison," she said into the camera. "If you're watching this, I'm probably dead. My husband, Richard Harrison, has been laundering money for ArcLight Holdings, a private medical research consortium conducting unauthorized genetic trials on vulnerable populations. I have proof. I was going to the FBI tomorrow, but Richard found out. He threatened to take Emma from me. He threatened to kill us both." Her voice broke. "I'm hiding this drive with my daughter. She's the only person I trust. Please, whoever finds this, protect her. And stop them." The video ended. The room stayed silent for a long moment. Then Ruiz closed the laptop. "This changes everything. Subscribe now, the final battle for justice is about to begin." The next morning, Kennedy woke to find Emma sitting by the window, staring out at the Brooklyn streets below. "Can't sleep?" Kennedy asked, sitting beside her. "I miss Mommy," Emma said softly. "But I'm glad I can finally tell the truth." Kennedy wrapped an arm around her. "Your mommy would be so proud of you." Emma looked up. "Will you stay with me? After all this is over?" Kennedy's throat tightened. "Baby, I'm not going anywhere." At the Federal Detention Center, Richard Harrison sat in an interrogation room, handcuffed to the table. Ruiz entered with the USB drive in hand. "Your wife was smarter than you gave her credit for," Ruiz said, placing it on the table. "She documented everything." Richard's face went pale. "We have financial records, patient files, and her testimony," Ruiz continued. "You're done. But if you cooperate, give us the names of everyone involved in ArcLight, we can talk about a deal." Richard leaned back, jaw clenched. "You think I'm afraid of prison? The people I work for will bury this. They'll bury you." "Maybe," Ruiz said. "But your daughter's testimony goes public tomorrow. And when America sees that video of Claire, there won't be anywhere you can hide." Richard's hands trembled. For the first time, fear flickered in his eyes. That evening, Kennedy and Emma sat together in the safe house, eating takeout Chinese food. Emma smiled for the first time in days, telling Kennedy about her favorite color, yellow, and how she wanted to be a scientist like her mother when she grew up. "You can be anything you want," Kennedy said. "You're the bravest person I know." Emma's smile faded slightly. "Miss Kennedy, what if they come back? The bad people?" Kennedy squeezed her hand. "Then we fight them together. Because you're not alone anymore." Emma nodded, but her eyes drifted toward the window. Outside, a black sedan idled across the street. Inside sat 2 men in dark suits, watching the building. One of them spoke into a radio, "Target located. Awaiting orders." The response crackled back, "ArcLight wants her alive. Move in at 0300. The hunt wasn't over. And tomorrow, when Emma testified, the world would finally know the truth. But tonight, darkness gathered. And it had a plan. It was raining again. The kind of New York rain that felt deliberate, as if the sky were warning them that peace wouldn't last. The safe house lights flickered as thunder rumbled overhead. Agent Daniel Ruiz stood at the narrow kitchen window, watching the reflection of headlights outside. "They've been parked there for an hour," he murmured. "Same sedan, no plates. They're watching." Kennedy set down her coffee. "You think it's Arclight again?" "I think it's everyone." Ruiz's voice was low, controlled. "Corrupt officials, private investors, half the city's boardrooms tied to Harrison's empire. They all have something to lose." On the sofa, 8-year-old Emma hugged her rabbit close, staring at the muted TV screen showing her father's face. The news headline read, "Harrison under investigation, billionaire believed to control global medical syndicate." Below it, a smaller banner, "Sources say key witness may be a child survivor of hidden experiments." Kennedy crossed the room and switched off the television. "No more of that," she said softly. Emma looked up. "Are they mad at me for talking?" Kennedy knelt beside her. "No, baby. You told the truth. That's never wrong." Ruiz turned from the window. "Truth upsets dangerous people, Emma. But that's why brave people exist, to protect it." Emma's lip trembled. "Are you brave, Agent Ruiz?" He glanced at Kennedy, smiling faintly. "Ask her. She's the brave one." But Kennedy didn't smile. Her stomach tightened with unease. She'd been watching the same streetlight flicker for 10 minutes, each flash carving shadows across the wall. It felt like a countdown. Before this story twists again, subscribe now. Something bigger than justice is coming. The next morning, Ruiz drove them to the Manhattan Federal Courthouse. Kennedy sat in the front seat beside him, clutching a sealed folder. Inside were copies of Claire Harrison's research, the proof that Arclight's gene therapy trials violated every human rights law imaginable. Emma sat quietly in the back, looking out the window as the city blurred past. "It's noisy," she said softly. "All the cars sound scared." Kennedy turned slightly, smiling without warmth. "You notice everything, don't you?" Emma nodded. "Mommy said the city never really sleeps. It just dreams ugly." Ruiz's hands tightened on the wheel. "Your mother was right." At the courthouse, Ruiz met with prosecutors in a hidden conference room. Kennedy waited with Emma in another hallway, its marble floors echoing with rehearsed footsteps. Reporters swarmed nearby, whispering guesses about the mystery child witness. Kennedy kept a firm grip on Emma's small hand. "Don't leave my side," she whispered. A woman in a navy suit approached. "Miss Kennedy Mitchell?" Kennedy turned. "Yes." The woman smiled too politely. "I'm from Child Services. I've been assigned to escort Emma to our protective interview room. Standard procedure for minor witnesses." Kennedy frowned. "That's not supposed to happen until the FBI clears it." The woman's smile didn't falter. Paperwork came through early. But Ruiz had drilled her to trust no one. "What's your clearance number?" Kennedy asked. The woman blinked. "My number?" Kennedy's heart sank. She grabbed Emma's hand, stepping back. "You're not with Child Services." The woman's smile broke. From her coat, she drew a syringe glinting with clear fluid. Kennedy shoved Emma behind her. "Run, baby." Emma bolted just as Ruiz burst through the stairwell door, drawing his weapon. "Drop it. FBI." The imposter turned and sprinted down the corridor, shoving through terrified onlookers. Ruiz gave chase, shouting for units while Kennedy dragged Emma behind a pillar. "I told you," Kennedy whispered, holding the trembling child close. "They won't stop until they get you." Emma looked up, tears streaming down her face. "Why do they want me?" "Because you're the only one they can't silence," Kennedy said. "Your mother made sure of it." Hours later, the imposter was gone, vanished into the city crowd before Ruiz's team cornered her. The courthouse buzzed with chaos, locked exits, sealed doors, and questions that had no easy answers. But the attack had done more than rattle nerves. It proved one thing. Arclight wasn't trying to kill Emma. They needed her alive. That evening, Ruiz sat with Kennedy in the interrogation briefing room, the fading sunset turning the glass walls amber. "I spoke to Washington," he said. "FBI confirmed, witness protection will take you both into the program. New names, new identities. You'll disappear." Kennedy's throat tightened. "What about the trial? The prosecutors can use Claire's files. They don't need Emma to testify in person anymore." Kennedy exhaled slowly. "That's good, right?" Ruiz hesitated. "In theory. But moving her now means running before Arclight does." Kennedy looked through the observation glass. Emma sat in the next room, drawing on a notebook. She was sketching two stick figures, one tall, one small, both standing under a sun with the word "safe" scrawled beneath. The drawing nearly broke Kennedy in half. "She thinks safety is a place," Kennedy said quietly. "She doesn't know it's a fight." Ruiz's phone buzzed. He checked the screen, and froze. It was a video file. No sender. He opened it. The screen filled with Richard Harrison's face, speaking from an undisclosed location. "Agent Ruiz," the billionaire rasped, his arms still bandaged. "You think you've won. But I've survived worse than this. Arclight doesn't forgive loose ends." Then he smiled, blood trickling from his lip. "You still have my daughter. Good luck keeping her." The video ended. Ruiz glanced at Kennedy. "He's not in custody anymore." Her blood went cold. "What?" "The transport van was ambushed, 2 agents dead." Kennedy stood abruptly. "You said she'd be safe." Ruiz holstered his weapon. "We're leaving tonight. Pack what you can. Subscribe now, the next move will decide who lives or dies." Night consumed the city quickly. By midnight, Kennedy, Emma, and Ruiz boarded a black SUV headed for an undisclosed airstrip in upstate New York. Rain streaked across the windshield as they left Manhattan behind. "Are we going far away?" Emma asked from the back seat. Ruiz nodded. "Somewhere no one can find you." But 2 hours into the drive, Ruiz noticed headlights in the side mirror, steady, unblinking, following them at distance. "Stay calm," he murmured to Kennedy. "Don't look back." She twisted slightly, seeing the vehicle's outline through the rain. "Who is it?" Ruiz didn't answer. He pressed harder on the gas. The second car matched his speed. Moments later, the rhythm of raindrops drowned in the sound of gunfire. Shots cracked against the SUV's rear window, shattering glass. "Down!" Ruiz shouted, swerving off the main road into the forest. The tires screeched against mud as Kennedy threw herself over Emma's small body. Branches whipped against the windshield. Ruiz drove until visibility failed, finally jerking the car to a stop behind a ridge. "We have to move." They stumbled into the trees, rain soaking their clothes. Kennedy carried Emma, while Ruiz covered the rear, his weapon drawn. Spotlights cut through the distant darkness, pursuers closing in. Kennedy's breath came ragged. "Why won't they give up?" Ruiz's voice was grim. "She's the living proof of what Arclight did to children. They invested billions into silence. One little voice ruins everything." They reached an abandoned hunting cabin nestled in the trees. Ruiz kicked the door open, ushered them inside, and barricaded it with broken furniture. The storm raged outside, thunder masking the sound of approaching engines. Emma stood near the flickering candle Ruiz lit. "Miss Kennedy," she said softly, "the man said he'd take me back." Kennedy knelt, cupping her face. "No one's taking you anywhere." Ruiz checked his weapon again. "Satellite signals jammed. We can't call for backup." Then what? Kennedy asked. We hold until dawn. Outside, a crack of thunder gave way to footsteps crunching wet leaves. Ruiz aimed toward the window. They're here. Gunfire erupted through the doorway. The agents who had followed were dressed in black, clean, tactical, professional. Their leader stepped forward, shouting over the rain. Hand over the girl, and we'll let you live. Ruiz fired 2 rounds back. Try to come through, and you'll die first. Kennedy clutched Emma, heart pounding. Why her? Why now? Ruiz ducked behind a table, bullets splintering wood. Because Richard created her, Kennedy. That research, those experiments, Emma is proof his wife was right. She's stronger than she should be. They want her DNA. Kennedy's mind reeled. You're saying, she was part of the experiments? Lightning flashed through the shattered door. Ruiz's face was pale. She was the first success, and the reason Claire tried to stop them. Emma whimpered. Am I bad? Kennedy hugged her tightly. No, baby. You're the best thing they ever made. More bullets tore through the windows. Ruiz leaned out and fired, dropping one attacker. Suddenly, the shooting stopped. The silence was worse than the storm. Kennedy heard footsteps outside, then a slow clap. A man's voice followed, low and eerily familiar. Well done, Miss Mitchell. You lasted longer than most. Richard Harrison stepped through the doorway, his left arm bandaged, his eyes burning alive. Beside him stood 2 armed mercenaries. Daddy? Emma's voice cracked. Richard's smile widened. Hello, sweetheart. Kennedy stood between them. You're under federal warrant. Ruiz, shoot him. But Ruiz hesitated, his weapon shaking. They've got agents' families. If I shoot, they die. Richard laughed softly. You see, Kennedy. Everyone breaks eventually. He pointed the gun at her. Step aside, and I'll let you live. She comes with me. Kennedy stepped forward anyway. Over my dead body. Richard sighed. That was the plan. Lightning filled the cabin. The gunfire began again. Lightning split the sky like a scream. The safe house power had gone out 5 minutes ago, leaving the halls drenched in shadows. Kennedy pressed her back against the wall, clutching Emma's small hand tightly, her heart hammering so loud she swore the whole building could hear it. A low voice echoed from the intercom, distorted and cold. Give me the girl, it said. And everyone inside lives. Emma's grip on her rabbit tightened. That's Daddy's voice, she whispered. Kennedy crouched down to her level. Rain pelted the roof above them. Listen to me, baby. Whatever happens, don't let go of me. Suddenly, the front doors exploded inward. Armed men in black stormed the lobby, flashlights cutting through darkness. Muffled radio chatter filled the air. Arclight had arrived. Ruiz shouted orders from the stairwell above. Take cover. Secure the witness. Bullets followed his command. Before what happens next, subscribe now, it's about to get dangerously real. Kennedy grabbed Emma, ducked behind a desk, and crawled toward the hall. Gunfire crackled, echoing off the safe house walls. Each shot vibrated through the floor, but she didn't stop moving. She could feel the child trembling in her arms, the small heartbeat against her chest that meant everything in the world. At the corridor's end, Ruiz appeared, bleeding from a cut across his brow. Back exit, now. They sprinted through smoke-filled hallways toward the rear door. Outside, floodwaters pooled under the torrential storm. Ruiz turned to fire behind them, suppressing the attackers just long enough for Kennedy and Emma to reach the loading bay. But before they could escape, a tall figure emerged from the shadows, blocking their path. Richard Harrison. Alive. Barely, but alive. Raindrops streamed down his face, mixing with blood, his left arm still bandaged where Ruiz had shot him days ago. Beside him, 2 gunmen flanked the exit. "No one leaves," he said calmly. "Hand her over." Ruiz aimed his weapon. "You're finished, Harrison. The FBI owns your empire." "You'd need to understand my empire before claiming it," Richard replied with a smirk. "I built Arclight to protect the future. To save generations. My daughter is proof human evolution can be perfected. She belongs with me." "She's not your experiment," Kennedy hissed. "She's my creation." The gunmen raised their weapons. Ruiz fired first. Chaos erupted. Sparks flew from bullets striking lockers. Kennedy ducked, shielding Emma with her body. When the shot stopped, 1 gunman was down. But Ruiz was hit in the leg, collapsing with a grunt. Blood soaked through his jeans. Richard moved closer. "You can't protect her forever, Kennedy. She carries the cure, the same one the world will kill for." Kennedy glared at him. "Your wife was right about you. You don't save lives. You destroy them." Richard's eyes flickered. "You think Claire was a saint? She used Emma before I ever did." Ruiz groaned, reloading. "Don't listen, he's stalling." Richard stepped forward, gun trembling slightly. "Emma's DNA holds immunity to 12 genetic diseases. We spent billions to build her. She was never meant to be ordinary." Kennedy's hands shook. "She was meant to be loved." Emma peeked from behind her, tears streaking down her face. "Daddy, please stop." He turned to her, his voice breaking. "Sweetheart, I did all of this for you. For us." Thunder boomed above them. "She's not yours anymore," Kennedy said. Richard's arm raised, aiming the gun directly at Kennedy's head. Then, Emma screamed. "Mama!" The sound silenced everything, gunfire, thunder, even the storm itself. It ripped through the air like something divine, something impossible. The word froze Richard in place. His hands trembled, his weapon clattered to the wet ground. Tears ran down Kennedy's cheeks as she turned. The child stood trembling, breath shallow but voice finally free. She'd spoken. For the first time in her 8 years of life, she'd chosen a word, and it wasn't Daddy. It was Mama. Kennedy dropped to her knees, arms open. Emma ran straight into them. Ruiz shouted, "Now," and fired another shot. The bullet hit Richard's gun hand, spinning him backward. Agents burst through the far side of the hall, shouting warnings. Flashlights and red dots filled the room. Richard stumbled, clutching his bleeding wrist. "You can't stop what's coming," he gasped. "Arclight is everywhere." Ruiz leveled his pistol at him. "Maybe. But you're not." The shot echoed. Richard collapsed, lifeless this time, his empire crashing down with him. An hour later, the storm subsided. The emergency lights on the roof flickered back on. Kennedy sat on an ambulance step, Emma wrapped in a blanket beside her. Ruiz, wounded but conscious, was stretched out on a gurney as medics treated him. "You did it," Ruiz said weakly. "You saved her." Kennedy shook her head. "No. She saved me." Emma leaned into her shoulder, whispering softly. "You're my mama now." The word struck harder than any bullet. Kennedy smiled through her tears, her hand trembling as she brushed hair from Emma's face. "Yeah, baby. I am." Don't miss what comes next. Subscribe now for the heart-stopping finale. Days later, headlines filled the nation. Arclight syndicate unveiled, billionaire scandal shakes government. 8-year-old survivor rescued from genetic trial cover-up. Congress launched an international investigation. Ruiz testified before federal courts, revealing every corrupt name Claire Harrison's files had exposed. Executives were arrested. Labs were raided. Arclight fell. Quietly, the U.S. Marshals relocated Kennedy and Emma under new names. Their identities sealed. Their pasts erased. But some truths cannot be hidden, not completely. In a small Oregon town, sunrise painted the sky over a modest yellow house. Kennedy stood on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching as Emma played in the yard, chalking words on the walkway, simple words she had fought her whole life to say. Love. Safe. Home. Each letter glowed bright against the early morning light. The girl who once couldn't speak had filled the silence with color, laughter, and life. Kennedy smiled through quiet tears. A year had passed since that night in the storm, since Richard Harrison fell, since Arclight was dismantled. But some ghosts never really left, they lived in the spaces between peace and remembrance. Ruiz had survived. He called sometimes, his voice steady but older, always ending with the same words, "You saved more than one kid that day, Kennedy." She never told him how she woke some nights, hearing echoes of thunder and Richard's voice whispering about perfection. The sound would pass, replaced by Emma's soft humming through the walls. Kennedy looked out across the yards where other children were drawing hopscotch squares and suns. Emma looked up and waved. "Mama. Come see." That word never stopped breaking her heart in the best possible way. Kennedy knelt beside her, setting the coffee aside. "What's this one?" Emma pointed to her newest word, written in bright pink chalk, "Tomorrow." Kennedy smiled. "Tomorrow? What's happening then?" Emma grinned. "Tomorrow we start over." Behind them, the wind caught the trees in a soft ripple, scattering chalk dust into the air like confetti. For the first time in years, everything felt right. Far away, in a government evidence archive outside Washington, a technician boxed and sealed the last of the Arclight files. Before closing the folder marked Project Harrison, terminated, he hesitated, noticing one remaining USB drive missing from the log. The slot where Copy 7 should have been was empty. He frowned, locked the cabinet, and walked away. Under a desk nearby, a small red data stick blinked once, then went dark. Back in Oregon, Kennedy took Emma's hand as they walked toward the garden. The world had tried to take everything from them, voice, family, home, but here, amid the morning light and laughter, they had found the one thing no one could fake or steal. A future. Together.